Welcome back to Unleashed, the Service Dog Gals. We're going to talk about court and facility dogs. I don't know about you, Meg, but I find it really hard to talk about abuse. And I'm a researcher of abuse, but it's so hard to talk about it. And when you're a victim of crime, sharing the truth about what happened can be absolutely terrifying. Imagine how much more difficult that could be for a child. But that's part of why I love facility support dogs. And I would have to say they really do hold my heart in this. And I'm so excited to talk about this with you because I heard you had some direct experience with this.
Yes, I do. So today we are diving into facility dogs, and I'm going to first explain for listeners out there that are not sure what we're talking about, what facility dog means, and then the term courthouse dog. So we're going to be interchanging those terms, but first I want to do an overview. So what is a facility dog? A facility dog is trained the same as a service dog, but where they differ is then they are given skills that can help many people instead of one individual. They're supporting lots of people on behalf of the facility. And they are also differing in access rights. A service dog can go anywhere with you. A facility dog can only go where they are invited on behalf of the facility. For example, a courthouse. Another example, I can't just bring my facility dog that I work with to a grocery store because I feel like it. Now, the other type of dog that is in the courthouse that we've been seeing is therapy dogs. What they do is they usually take the cream of the crop of the therapy dogs, and they also don't have public access rights unless they're invited in. So just kind of the same as facility dogs, they have to be invited there, and their behavior has to be appropriate in the courthouse so that they can provide support. Now, where you might see those two different dogs in court, they're not the same. And where the differences are is a facility dog, as I said, it starts the training the same as a service dog. They are paired with a professional handler, whereas a therapy dog is someone's personal pet. They've done some advanced training. They have been deemed appropriate to go into a courthouse. Again, it's not all therapy dogs. You have to go through additional testing, and you have to continue to behave appropriately in court to offer support to individuals. Now, when you have a professional handler, when they're paired up with someone in court, they can be there for the duration of the trial, which is really great for someone who's testifying. You want to have some control when you're in a very unknown environment, a very scary environment. So to know that you're going to have this dog there that you've met, that you've maybe your trial's a few days, maybe it's a few weeks. And so who that dog is, it gives a sense of security, a sense of safety, which is really great. Therapy dogs are a really great addition just because there was such a high need, which is why they got entered. But you may end up with different handlers just because they're volunteers. It's their personal pet. It's not their profession. And so that's where they're different. And yes, so when you think of courthouse dogs, you might see both of them, but they are different in their training, their standards, and their function in the sense of what they're able to do and what they have the capacity to do. So those are the different types of dogs. Now, when we talk about facility dogs in general, it's operating on behalf of a facility. So those can happen in a hospital. It can happen in a school. When we're talking about courthouse dogs, they're still facility dogs, but they are operating within the courthouse. And I know we've talked about this before, Bridget.
Yeah.
But when working with service dog agencies, we would always call them the bomb-proof dogs. And I know that this term was a bit controversial for you. Maybe we can get into that, but I'll just explain why we refer to these dogs as bomb-proof, because you do not want a dog that is reactive at all, because the courtroom can be very calm and it can also be very chaotic. There's a lot of fluctuation with emotions. You don't want a dog that is distracted. If there's a disruption in court, you want to make sure that you can guarantee this dog is not going to have a negative reaction, a negative response. You have to be able to trust this dog with so much. And so that's why we're saying bomb proof. It's not that they don't react. Of course, all dogs react. They're going to, look around, be intrigued. You can trust them. You have full, complete trust with these dogs. They want to spend their time sleeping, but they also are very engaged when they have to be with the person they're supporting. They will connect with just about anyone they're there with, which is lovely and which is what you need.
Yeah, I think with bomb-proof dogs, I think it gives us this illusion that the dogs are more robotic and they're still sentient beings, right?
Yes.
Like if that jobble said that wrong, but if it the jobble, and there's like a loud bang in the courtroom, the dog might, being a sentient being, kind of startle up and look, oh, it's fine, and I'm going to go back to sleep, right? I mean, that is what we're after, is that bomb proof. But just being bomb proof doesn't take away that they're an animal and they still might have some reactions. So that's my only concern with the way we speak about it, is that we don't kind of allude to the fact that they're not, this thing that just doesn't experience the environment they're in, because they do.
People think, say those things too, right? It's like, well, do they do nothing? Do they not react? Of course they do. It's so normal. Even in the testing stage of it, there's a piece of the testing that you have to do where you have to have a noise distraction. And the dog can look, so long as it doesn't set them back into reaction that they can't overcome.
Yeah, we're looking for them to be able to recover from these situations.
Yeah.
Experience the environment and then they recover. Just like me, if you banged something, I'd be kind of startled and look, oh, nope, I'm good, and come back to the conversation.
So you have to have those realistic expectations, but you also have to have that complete trust in the dog. I always remember when I was a handler, I was a trainer, I was a handler. I've been very fortunate to do both sides of it. But the one courthouse was right by the main street. And even during testimony, you always heard the fire trucks and the police trucks. It was very distracting, but I trusted my dog. So even if she would kind of look, I wasn't worried that she was going to get up, go over there, or just be set off by whatever those sounds were. She could recover,
Right.
Yeah.
So I think my only, I don't even want to say issue. My only thing that when I think of bomb-proof dogs is making sure we keep it realistic when we talk about these
Dogs.
beings. They're dogs.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Because oftentimes, and I mean, we were having a conversation about language before we started.
Yeah.
And if we put out words without really explaining what those words mean, right? We all know it. People are going to grab and go with it. And then all of a sudden, those expectations become so unrealistic for these dogs, right? Yeah. So. But I mean, I do like the word bomb proof because I think it gives us a good understanding of what's expected of these dogs.
Yeah, and there's been some incredible leaders in making sure that courthouse dogs are the cream of the crop here. In the States, there is courthouse dogs, and they really laid the foundation to make sure there's regulation within it. Because if you think of a trial, and if there's a disruptive dog, if the dog pees, if the dog barks, if it can impact that entire trial. So you have to have the highest standards when you're bringing a dog in. It also can ruin it for other dogs that have that high standard. So courthouse dogs really set out to lay the standards, just making sure that they were clear. Justice dogs in Canada had the same drive to make sure that the dogs that are in the courthouse are just incredible and making sure to adhere to industry standards through Assisted Dogs International. Now, where I come in, I also had the same drive that I wanted, maybe I'm going to go into, you know what, for the listeners, if you don't know who I am, I trained courthouse dogs. When I first started, the dog that I had trained was not intended for court. And so when I first got with her, I thought it was such a good idea. I'm like, oh, I've been a trainer for 10 years. I understand quite a bit about dogs and training and behavior. And the dog was a mess. And the dog was intended to support our staff. And then transfer over, management wanted the dog to go into court. And I'm like, well, I've never done that before, but I do understand dog training. And lucky for me, my mentor at the time was working for a service dog organization. And so I still had to apply and everything, but I was able to secure a job there based off of my experience, because my goal, just like courthouse dogs and justice facility dogs, is to make sure those standards are there. The organization was incredibly supportive. They knew I was kind of doing it not kind of, I was doing it in a way that wasn't normally done, I guess going against the grain, but that's kind of me. And they were incredibly supportive because they knew I also had that same drive to make sure those standards are there. I wasn't just going to say that this dog is fine, put it in a courthouse, and it wasn't. And actually, at the time, there were no dogs in that courthouse. So making sure that we were adhering to the standards and following what courthouse dogs had laid out, following what justice dogs had laid out, and the industry as a whole had laid out. I wanted to make sure that this dog was able to support people in the way it needed to. In the courthouse, there was pushback because it was new. It was new in the courthouse that we were putting the dog into. So judges, crowns, defense, what the heck is this? And at that time, there was a lot of education on what these dogs can do for witnesses that are coming in to testify and what the supports are, what the expectations of the handler is, what the expectations of the dogs are, laying out those standards for the court to show what incredible support and professional support these dogs could be. Once that was extended a bit more into court, there was a lot less pushback, there was a lot more regulation, which was needed. Then we could really start to see the tremendous effects these dogs have. Bit of a background just because what are these dogs? How did this happen?
Yeah.
But I do want to speak to why is this important? Why there's all the regulations, all the safety, all that everything, and why these dogs have to be who they are. But what are they doing there? And who are they helping? And why is it even needed? Why do you need a dog in court? Well, here's why. When someone is going up to provide their evidence, they're speaking to what happened to them. When there's someone that's deemed a vulnerable victim, to someone that needs extra support, there's these things called support tools in court. And we were successful to get facility dogs added to that list. The way they're able to offer support is in a few different ways. A lot of times people think, oh, they're supporting on the stand. Sometimes they do. But when there is that vulnerability that's identified, there's also what's called a CCTV room. It can be a very comfortable space, as comfortable as you can make a courthouse, but there's a couch and the dog can go up on the couch and lay right beside that person. So when you're imagining someone speaking to that awful experience, one, they're not having to look directly at the person who did that to them. And two, you're getting emotional. And
I couldn't imagine being a 10-year-old child having to enter into a courtroom.
yeah,
Like, that would be terrifying. And it not only is this like helping that child, but I'm getting emotional thinking about the bigger impact this is having by making the courtroom more victim-centered. And that is massive to me.
when you talk about that, I have this case that comes to my mind, and the girl had come in and she had her little squishy with her, and it's just this innocence. And then she sees the dog. And so there's these elements of joy and these elements of comfort and safety and, lighthearted conversation amongst this very serious situation that they're going to have to speak to. At that age, they might not even grasp how horrible it is. There's so much innocence around it.
We know that going into the courtroom can re-traumatize. Not all, but it can certainly, the process, the criminal justice system itself can re-traumatize. And that's hard. So having this type of support, yeah, it's powerful.
It is. Yeah, we've heard people, again, I'm so fortunate to be able to be a trainer, to develop programs, but also to be a handler, because then I really got to see it in practice. And having people say, I couldn't have done this without this dog here. And not just a random dog, but a dog that is so calm when a situation in your head or verbally can be very chaotic and very overwhelming. That dog is just grounding. There's quite a bit of evidence to support that and how effective they are. Some things that we would find were really helpful if someone is on the stand or if they're in the CCTV room and there's not a couch and the dog's at their feet, we would always encourage them, take off your shoes if you feel okay. And then it wasn't distracting, but they could rub their feet on the dog. And the dog, again, is trained to just be calm. When someone's doing that, they're curling into it. It's grounding the person while they're speaking to this experience. and then they're getting to have that warm touch and that comfort. Another thing we have is some of the tasks where there's physical pressure. So if it's on the couch, we will have the dog physically go over and provide that deep pressure, which again, there's so much research to support that can help reground and lower that accelerated heart rate. And it's also a break. When someone's talking and they're having a hard time, they get to a very difficult part in their testimony, they can reach down and pet the dog. But we've also had people just say, "Can I have a moment?" And the judge, I remember this one, the judge was like, "Just take a moment." And then that person was able to stop. They were so emotional, of course, speaking to this thing. Then they were able to stop and then like pet the dog and regain their composure and, you know, as much as they could, and then speak again. And then before, I love this one, but like, when I say I love this one, it's horrible experiences, but it's just like speaking to how amazing these dogs are and how they do make such a difference. But that same person had finished testifying and then, you know, could have just walked out, right? Get out of the room. This was an open court. And they stopped and they sat down with the dog and they just sat on the mat and pet the dog. And then they were able to walk by because, again, you're walking by that person that did this horrific crime to you. So yeah, that's speaking to what they
do.
Yeah, the magic that they are. And
Yeah, they really do impact the cardiovascular system, blood pressure, right? Like you said it, and there's lots of empirical evidence. I mean, most of the evidence I've looked through on this has been on child witnesses.
Yes.
Right? Like that seems where we really have a lot of evidence on it, which is really great. I'm kind of one thing that strikes me as interesting for these types of dogs, because if you know me well enough, you know I'm always going to talk about the sentience of animals. And you know, they are a being in of themselves. But I find it particularly interesting because these dogs have such a positive impact on people. It's undeniable, right? Like we just know this. But I'm always going to kind of extend that question out, but what are the impacts on the dog? Right? Because that's a hard job to have, right? Like, as a crisis counselor, how hard it is.
So again, I've gotten to see both sides, and that was such an important thing for me was what is this doing to the dog?
Mhm.
And we care about animals. You know, people who love animals love animals. People who love dogs. And that is a concern. Is this too much? Is what the dog's taking on? It's a lot of emotion. They feel emotion. They're very in tune to it. So of course there's going to be impact. Part of the program that I developed was making sure there was downtime for the facility dog when, you know, let's say they did a 4-day trial or a 3-day trial, that the next day was their own mental health day and their own wellness day. And then also before and after court, making sure to implement strategies so that the facility dog is able to have its own wellness time, its own downtime, and in between, because there's always there's like a very long lunch break that is there. And there's a lot of waiting in court. Let me just say that. And that's another piece is the dogs are able to support people while they're providing evidence. Something people didn't know, I didn't know before I went into court. I was shocked. It's so much waiting. You know, you get to court, you have people anticipating they're going to testify. You have the dog, you have the support, you have everything. It's like, we don't have a judge. You don't have a judge. It's been months, like it's been years, or we don't have a courtroom, or there's these matters before. So I had one case where we waited, got there at 10 a.m. or 9:30 because it starts at 10, and it finished at 3 or 4. 30 minutes before it finished, they finally went on. And this is trafficking, this is sex assault, this is child abuse, you know, these are very serious crimes, and they're coming and having to wait all day. So to have the dog to sit with and to wait with, to maybe step out and throw the ball at lunch, it really does help to provide a bit of a reprieve from this process.
I love that you kind of built in, because I see animals as workers, right?
Yeah.
Like across the board, I can make the argument for almost every animal is a worker, but like these dogs are like professional workers in courtrooms. So I love that you've kind of included in your programming workers' rights, downtime, breaks, right? Days off, all stuff we experience as workers ourselves.
Yeah. And that was something I did on my own because I don't know how much it's built into programs. That very well may be. But for me, I saw the dog and the impact that it had on me as a handler, taking all this in and these long days and all that. It's like, well, the dog, the dog that I was working with feels it too.
They do. There's an academic term for it, emotional contagion. Just means that, their stress levels, dogs' stress levels increase when they hear and see people in distress.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us have probably experienced that with our dogs. We start crying. What do they do?
Yeah, they are in tune to it.
Yeah. I mean, my dog isn't. He's like, you're on your own, lady.
If I rephrase, some dogs are in tune to it. And courthouse and facility dogs should be.
That's definitely an emotional thing that they take on.
Yes.
Right? So that kind of leads me to what kind of dog would you see? Like, what temperament would you see as a good facility dog? Because I see these types of dogs as being like gentle and wise, like the old soul type dog.
Yeah, it's call it like the Eeyore dog. Yeah. I say that, but my dogs that I trained were not. They were quite the opposite. So then I kind of had to like construct an Eeyore through exercise, making sure that very well exercised. But what you're looking for are all the things you said, just a dog that's very in tune and engaged and wants to cuddle, but also loves to sleep, because since court is a very long day, and any handler out there is going to know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're in these long court days, the dog falls asleep. And one of the things that dogs do when they sleep is they can have puppy dreams. So you have to know as a handler, and you're very close to the dog. You have to be. You trust the dog, but you have to be close. And so trying to like tickle their paws to wake them up a little bit, or they start snoring very loud. The one dog I had snored so loud. So you have to kind of like get them out of that complete REM sleep or happy dream. They start chasing things, but that can also provide a bit of a comic relief. Whether it's the jury, whether it's the person, it is this kind of cute little, again, reprieve. But yeah, you want a dog that's really engaged, that loves to sleep, that
highly people oriented, I imagine.
Highly people oriented, just kind of goes with the flow, like
stress averse.
You want that lower like kind of personality.
Want to work, right? Like, this isn't a dog you can really make work.
No. And so I say, oh, they love to sleep. However, on their days off, if they're not with people, they're like, what do I do? Well, I'll give the dog that I'm working with right now. She will sleep all day. She's incredible in court. And to someone else, they're like, oh, does this dog ever get to, I don't know, have excitement? This is exciting for this dog. This is like filling this dog's soul to be with people. And when there's off days, the dog is like, what do I do? Where's my people? Where's my cuddles? So yeah, you want a dog that does inherently want to be with people and engaged and cuddle. You want that as the foundation.
Yeah, I love that. So they're pretty specialized and special dogs.
They are. I love facility dogs because that's where I got my story. I had a batch of facility dogs. I'm not baking a cake, but I am shaping something. But yeah, my first love was facility dogs because that was my first exposure. And then having the theory of what they do, but then actually getting to live it was just like no other. And now when I support handlers, when I support programs, I can do it from such an informed perspective because I've had all the sides. I know what they're going through. This is another piece. There's the mental wellness and the mental well-being of the dogs. I learned this through myself. Has to be a consideration for the handler too, because they are taking in all of the details. And when it's really heavily geared towards court work, as a crisis counselor, you take in general information. Sometimes you take in specifics. When you're doing court, they have to speak to those specifics. And that can be so hard on the dog because the energy, and then also on the handler.
Well, of course, because if the dog is feeling that stress, obviously you have to be too.
Yes. And the programs I support, I always make sure there's wellness for the dog, but wellness for the handler too. That's part of the learning and the growing for courthouse dogs is it's much bigger than just a dog in court.
So I have a question then, because the dogs are partnered with a human professional. Where does the dog live? Where do they sleep? Who is in charge of the dog?
The facility. The
Got it.
facility owns the dog. They own the rights to the dog. Well, actually, that's untrue. Let me try that again. Okay. So the organization, if the dog is from an organization, they own the dog.
Right.
So they place it with the agency. But if the agency isn't following they're not able to maintain the standards, they're not listening to training advice. Maybe the dog, there was one case where it was severely overweight and the dog was taken away. And so the agency has the right to take a dog away. The nonprofit agency also can help if the dog's not working out. They can, switch them for another dog that's more appropriate. Now, if it's one that has been trained, such as how I did it, it was the organization that owned it that I worked for. So they owned it. I always knew that. I love this dog. The dog lives with me. But also part of that handler wellness, there should always be two handlers, ideally, because again, I use this example all the time as a crisis counselor. No one's asking me to bring files home to review on my off time. But when you're a handler of a dog, yes, that dog has to go somewhere on the weekend. Having a secondary handler allows you to have a break because, yes, that dog is amazing and you have an incredible bond with it. They also are a reminder to what you have heard that week. And maybe you've had a really horrific case that you sat through and you had to take it in. So making sure that there's space for everyone, different energies, different space, and really making it a priority to have the wellness of the handler and the dog. So no, I didn't own the dog. I always knew that. And then it's up to the agency where they decide they want to retire. Typically, it's with whoever has spent the most time with the dog, maybe a number of years, but there's so many considerations and factors that go into it. Because if you have multiple handlers that have spent multiple years with the dog, other agencies, they'll share them. So maybe there was 3 handlers in that dog's life. They'll kind of share them in retirement, or maybe one person wants to. So it's either up to the nonprofit organization or whoever has purchased the dog, the facility, and has paid for the dog, because they're putting out for vet bills, they're paying out for food, for wellness, everything. They cover that. So it's not typically the handler's dog. It's the agency. You're a paid employee.
Well, and that makes sense because animals are property in the law. So
Yes.
we're going to be following property logics in where this animal is going to land, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a question. We've been talking about how we can, make this work more comfortable for the dog. And we talked about workers' rights. I'm trying to imagine where this dog, like how we can make physical changes in the environment to help, because a courtroom's not dog friendly, right? Like it's not made for a dog. So how can we slot a dog into the courtroom?
It's a great question. And the first courthouse that we were able to get the dogs in and that I worked in, the boxes where someone will testify, they were so small. They were so small. So Meryl was the first one in is it Canada or Ontario to be a courthouse dog. And she was from National Service Dogs. She was so small.
So she was in London.
Yeah, she went to London. She went to the victim witness workers in London, which are court support workers. She was tiny, so she had more of a chance of fitting in. But some of these bigger boys, Iggy, I'm thinking specifically, was just the best dog. And he's with Boost in Toronto. And so we're trying to figure out how can we support, but how is it okay for the dog? And one of the things that we ended up doing was bringing raised dog beds into the courtroom. I remember there was one court support worker, they're called Victim Witness Assistance Program, VWAP for short. They were offering to raise money for these dog beds to get them to different courthouses. So then we would put it right beside the witness stand. And then it was level enough so that the person testifying could reach down and still pet the dog, because if they weren't in the box, then they were too low and then they could only kind of look over. But these raised dog beds got them up. Same with even in the CCTV room. We would put the raised dog bed, and then again, the person sitting in the seat, they're testifying, and all they had to do was reach their hand down. Instead of going off camera, because there's a live stream, they could just put their hand down and then already reach the dog. Whereas before, when we were figuring things out, how does this work? They would have to go all the way off screen, which could be an issue of question. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the things that we did.
Yeah, it's really ingenious to see, because like I said, I mean, courtrooms are not designed in a way for animals, right?
No.
So how do we accommodate? And that's a really cool way to accommodate them in, because I was thinking myself, what do we do with those big boys?
There's big boys, so we got to include them all. So some can fit in there, some can't, but we make sure to have a place for everyone.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
very cool. So you kind of mentioned that you've worked for an organization and freelance, but I'm kind of interested in what challenges did you face when you were freelancing?
The biggest challenge was I started with a dog that has never done any type of exposure or access training before. So the dog was a mess. So I had to rehabilitate this dog. Again, the foundation was there. The foundation of just being so lovely with people, having those instincts, but behavior and obedience wise and public access, this dog was a mess. I'll never forget the moment. I was sitting in the chief's gala, chief of police, and he had gotten wind of this program. And he announces to everyone at this like very fancy gala in the city that he is so excited about this program. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like this dog is, I cannot
That's a
fail.
lot of pressure.
That is so much pressure. And so getting that opportunity I was like, I can't fail. I have to figure this out. And then getting that opportunity to work with the service dog organization, I was already a dog trainer for such a long time. So I already had that, experience and professionalism around it, but specifically for facility dogs. So being able to work and really understand those skills to make sure the dog adhered to those professional standards that had already been laid, that was a massive challenge. And even more so because at the time I was already working for an agency full time. And then I did this part-time. I was pregnant. Driving was like 5 hours of commuting a day to get there. I put in the work to make sure, like as a freelance, I'm like, it's very unconventional what I'm doing, but I will not have this fail. I will not sacrifice the standards that have been laid. I remember like I said, I was pregnant. I had my ribs popping out every Friday. I would have them pop back in by a chiropractor. I was driven to make sure this was successful. And I was supported in that through my mentor, through the service dog organization, through belief from my agency. I don't know that they should have believed in me at that time, but they did. And I'm so happy.
I would say they put money on you.
They put money on me and I delivered. I delivered.
So I just want to understand, you went freelance and then you left the organization. Why did you leave the organization? I understand you were pregnant around the same time.
Yeah, the organization was incredible. And as I said, they were very, at first, skeptical. What are you doing? Like doing it outside of, the regular, what's the word I'm looking for? Avenue, stream that people typically take, but they were still very supportive. I left at the time because of pregnancy complications and issues. I ended up going on bed rest. It was just a disaster. My son's good though. I'm good.
Okay.
Yay. And yeah, they were incredibly supportive. I loved working for them. I unfortunately didn't go back because I had my son. I wasn't able to make that commute anymore. But we still stayed connected. They had such a lengthy wait list. We tried to get our other dog for them just to say thank you, like thank you so much, and go through the ADI route and the nonprofit route. But they had their wait list closed when we were getting our second dog. I have nothing but good things to say about them.
I would imagine 5 hours, like props to you for doing this. Pregnant, like, wow.
It's a lot. But another huge barrier or issue that I experienced was going from having the backing of an agency that I am a legitimate service dog trainer. I know what I'm doing. These are all my successful dogs. And then everything is heavily questioned. I no longer have that backing. And people are wondering, well, wait, if you're not through an organization, then it's not enough or you shouldn't be allowed in. Well, I can train the same dog and I will make sure that I have that professionalism to adhere to the standards. I'm still the same trainer. I just don't have that backing. And that was a challenge. And I think it should be a challenge because you want to make sure that people going in are doing what they're supposed to, especially when all that foundational work had been laid.
Well, and especially in a field, like a lot of animal fields are unregulated, right? Anyone can say and do anything. So of course it's good to have those questions.
It's great to have those questions. And I think people were more at ease. The more presentations I put on, the more I was able to speak to what I do and what my goal was, which is the same as them, to have the foundation they set, because we are trying to regulate. I think it would be incredible for, everyone to have that opportunity to get the dogs to those standards.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that segues us nicely into tuning into our next episode, where we're going to talk about who gets to decide what a real service dog is. Unleashed,
The Service Dog Gals.
trauma, disability, and those who get left out. To keep hearing more of our content, like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform.